Hi, shalom everyone. Today we are in Tzom Gedaliyah, the fast of the 3rd of Tishrei. Tzom Gedaliyah, I've got the Siddur. We said a bit of Slichot prayers in the Shacharit service today. As you can see, the Siddur Arbat Tanyot, it's one of the 4 fasts itself, respectively. Slichot Tzom Gedaliyah, a special liturgy we said today. We insert inside the Shemona Esrei. During the various different Shemona Esreis today and in Mincha, an extra portion within regards to fast, and a special Kriyat Torah for the fast day itself. It's one of the 4 minor fasts. We've learned that there's 6 fasts during the year. We've spoken about this on various occasions before, and this is one of the minor fasts, along with Aseret Yemai Teshuva, also Ta'anit Esther, the fast of Esther, which is just before Purim, and the other one, Shiva Asar Tammuz, is the 17th of Tammuz. So we've spoken about this before, of Tzom Gedaliyah. It's not the first time we're speaking about it. Maybe last 3 years we've spoken about it. So obviously this is one day after Rosh Hashanah. It's a day after Rosh Hashanah, which commemorates, let's say, a Jewish tragedy, which message actually reverberates even today. The day after Rosh Hashanah marks the fast of Gedaliyah, obviously being one of the minor fasts. Now, what is the meaning of this fast, and why does it occur during the intermediate days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, during the Aseret Yemai Teshuva? So let's explore a bit with regards to the story, what actually happened with regards to the great man, Gedaliyah. It was at the time after the destruction of the first temple, the Bet HaMikdash, 2,500 years ago. The majority of the Jewish people were exiled, including the 10 tribes at the hands of Sanherib. The eventual conqueror, Nebuchadnezzar, the wicked Nebuchadnezzar, later eased harsh restrictions and allowed some Jewish people to remain in the land of Israel. He even appointed a righteous Jewish person of the name Gedaliyah to administrate the territory. Now, gradually, more Jewish people who'd escaped from, let's say, the horrors of the war into neighboring countries began to return to their homes in Israel. Now, Gedaliyah, though, was realistic about the limitations of Jewish sovereignty at that point in time. He understood for their own self-preservation, the Jewish people in Israel needed to fully cooperate with a nation who had conquered the land at that point in time. But this political subservience was intolerable to some Jewish people. There was a man of the name, his name was Yishmael ben Netaniah. He spurred on, he had a lot of jealousy, it was said over, and there was a lot of foreign influence. He arose and ignored the king of Babylon. On the 3rd of Tishrei, Yishmael, say treacherously, killed Gedaliyah, as well as many other Jewish people and the Babylonians at that point in time. So you can see already the disaster that actually came from this in of itself. Now, let's say there's an answer, you could say, on Yom Kippur itself. In the aftermath of Gedaliyah's murder, the Jewish people feared reprisal from the king of Babylon. They, though, to flee to Egypt to save themselves, but since Egypt was a morally corrupt society, the Jewish people were in a quandary over here, weighing the physical threat against the spiritual danger. So they turned to the prophet Yirmiyahu, who was secluded in mourning, to ask for advice at that point in time. Now, for an entire week, Jeremiah pleaded with God for an answer. Finally, it was on Yom Kippur, he was answered. Jeremiah called the Jews and told them to stay in Israel, and everything would be fine. God was planning to make the Babylonians act mercifully towards the Jews, and before long, all the exiled Jews would be permitted to return to their own soil. But Jeremiah told them, if the Jews decided to go to Egypt, unfortunately, the sword from which they were running would kill them over there. That's what was said over. Unfortunately, the prophet's words did not penetrate, and the people refused to believe. All the Jews remaining in Israel packed their bags and went down to Egypt. They even kidnapped Jeremiah at that point in time and took him with them. Now the destruction was complete. The land of Israel was completely barren. And you can guess what happened next. A few years later, Babylon conquered Egypt, and tens of thousands of Jewish exiles were completely wiped out. The lone survivor of this massacre was Jeremiah. His prophecy, unfortunately, had become true over there. Now, the initial event, the murder of Gedaliyah, had been, let's say, likened to the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash itself, because it cost... Yeah, sorry about the connection went. The murder of Gedaliyah had been likened to the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash because it cost Jewish lives and brought the end of Jewish settlement in Israel for many years. Now the prophets therefore declared that the anniversary of this tragedy should be... Okay, so over here, so the Jews were exiled, and we see it looked hopeless. But God changed their desperate situation and had the righteous Gedaliyah appointed. Yet Gedaliyah was murdered by a Jew, and all the hope was wiped out. It was at this point that Jeremiah prayed to God for some insight and assurance. This was during the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Aseret Yemai Teshuva. This story is memorialized to teach us the important message for these days. No matter how far away you are, you can return and God will forgive you. There's another lesson. So there's another lesson we can learn from this, is that when the Jews who went to ask Jeremiah for advice were subconsciously sure that God would give the answer they wanted to hear. So when God answered differently, they rebelled. Yet these people were not bad people. What happened? Though these Jews were in one sense dependent on the will of the Babylonians, they were unwilling to be dependent on the will of God. The lesson is that attaching oneself to God means following Him at all times, not just when it happens to coincide with what you want. A good rule in life, when faced with a tricky moral dilemma, is to ask yourself, what would God say? What does He want me to do? There's another lesson.